as it's posited in the New Testament that God is love, would come up with the idea of, you know what? I am going to create a place where they're going to be tormented if they don't, forever, mind you. This is as it's posited. Hey folks, welcome to the channel, Thinking Theology. I'm Don. Today I'm taking a look at a theologian's problem, or a creationist's problem, or a biblical fundamentalist's problem, and it's the notion of hell. And the longer I've lived, the more I've found the notion completely untenable based on the premises that are even used within Christian thought. The primary one being that God is in control and God is loving. So, and I'm agnostic, so those of you who are atheists watching the channel, I'm not defending religion. I don't defend religion. I look at different lines of thought, and I'm a philosopher by nature, and so I'm curious about a lot of things. I don't think I have all the answers. Knowledge, epistemologically speaking, is an elusive concept. We have beliefs. And I don't mean religious beliefs, we have scientific beliefs. Everything falls into the category of belief based on the evidence, so-called evidence, no matter what realm it comes from. And some people think the sacred texts or the biblical texts are dispositive. Others think that's nonsense and think that the scientific world is dispositive. Some think mathematics is the answer to everything and can explain everything, whatever. We all have our own things that we look for that constitutes what we're going to rely upon as more believable, let's put it that way. But for me, I know any belief I have could be wrong. I could jettison it for a more favorable position that you may have, somebody may have. So I'm going to pose this theologian's problem this way, and if you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever and believe in the notion of hell or believe in the Creator, I'm still going to put it out there this way. We humans, we don't contemplate this enough, but we're basically born into a litter box in which so much is untenable or unsustainable for life, or civil life, if you want to call it that. We're born into sickness. We're born into a world of thievery, of where people lie, and we become familiar with our own mortality. Or at least the concept of death, that I, at some point, am going to die. Each of us has that experience when a pet dies, a grandparent dies, another relative dies, a friend, somebody dies, and our parents have to explain to us what that means. Then we become aware at some point that we ourselves are going to die. That makes life very difficult, especially when you consider that it's only been relatively recently in mankind's history that we live an average of above 30 years. Prior to penicillin and then other antibiotics, the average worldwide age in industrialized nations was about 30. So some people lived to 50, but children died at age 5 of a tooth infection, or anybody who was fighting in a war and cut themselves, they would die of an infection. No way to stop it. So the fever would overtake them and they would die. Now we get about 80 years in industrialized nations thanks to medical advances. What happens with these medical advances is now people die of dementia, osteoporosis, and other diseases that mankind didn't previously die from, not in any significant number, simply because we didn't live long enough to acquire these diseases. That sets the stage for the litter box in which we already live. So that all by itself, when we just stop and sort of let that simmer a little bit, that notion, that idea that, yeah, that is the world that we live in. We're so used to it that we get up, we go to work, we do our different things, raise the kids, try to plan for retirement. But always in the background is that even though we have homes and air conditioning and food, which makes it easier than, say, living out there and fighting lions and such, or in the Antarctic or wherever we might otherwise live, that it's still a very difficult, challenging place to live. Anything can go drastically wrong at any point, and in many places it does. Just read the headlines of whatever online site you're on or newspaper, or watch the news and you see how much stuff goes wrong. So that is torment enough. We're born into that. We don't even have a choice but to be born into that. And then the notion that if we don't do things just right according to the New Testament, let's say, that's predominantly what I'll be referring to today, because that's where the notion of hell is more frequently derived from, that there's this place of eternal torment, that if we don't, in this testing ground that we have here, if we don't get things just so, whether that's believing God raised Jesus from the dead or following, the law, Mosaic law, Deuteronomic law, all that stuff, that we might be in trouble on top of the world in which we live. That to me is an extraordinary problem for theologians based on the premises that God is all powerful, God is all loving, and yet he conceptualized this notion of additional eternal torment, not just a certain number of decades on planet Earth where life was difficult. And there's moments of joy in this life, absolutely. We look for those, we try to create those, but they don't last forever. Even ideal marriages have their struggles and challenges, and we have tooth decay, our bodies decay over time, and these are very difficult. So our parents die in the natural progression of things. These are very difficult things, and we experience those all throughout our lives. So the notion that a loving being, that somebody, as it's posited in the New Testament, that God is love, would come up with the idea of, you know what? I am going to create a place where they're going to be tormented if they don't, forever, mind you. This is as it's posited. I'm going to come up with a place that's so bad nonstop for these souls, these people who don't accept it. That to me is a theologian's problem. And I don't think a theologian, unless you're very, very, very bright, and I'm overlooking a lot, that's a insurmountable problem. So like, in addition to what we suffer here, and some people suffer their whole life. Some people are born into the inner city. Some people are born in labor camps in North Korea. Just some people have extremely difficult lives. And then if they didn't accept Jesus, or if they didn't abide by the law or whatever, didn't get things just so, they're going to have billions and trillions of years of torment. And I just don't, I don't believe it, but I find that to be an abhorrent notion. That not even Jesus himself, based on the texts where he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," not even Jesus would recommend that punishment to God as a punishment. I mean, in one sense, it would be better marketing, I guess. I mean, that's a crass word for some, but it would be better if the text simply said that when you die, that's it. You don't get to experience this incredibly joyful place called heaven, however you conceptualize that. But you other people who didn't accept Jesus, you're just going to cease to exist. All right, so there won't be any joy, but there won't be any pain. But the notion that some creator that is our overseer came up with the idea that I am going to make this eternal torment, fire and whatever scary and bad smells and all forever, is just an abhorrent idea. So at some point you've got to ask yourself, not can you substantiate it somewhere in the Bible, but what kind of being would even come up with an idea like that? And then additionally, it's also been about 2,000 years since the biblical accounts suggest, and it's, the narrative of the New Testament says Jesus was born and crucified, raised from the dead, and all. It's been about 2,000 years. So if we take the biblical account and say he suffered extraordinarily for that time on the cross, and it was an excruciating death, even if we accept that, it's been 2,000 years of many other people dying excruciating deaths. Some people much more hard than Jesus' death. So then people say, well, he never did any wrong. Okay, fair enough, according to the text. But if we're just looking at the agony which people focus on for the narrative of Jesus's death, the day basically that he was on the cross and his breathing was getting that, and then the Romans jabbed a sword into his side, all this stuff, there have been many, many, many hundreds of thousands of people that have died worse deaths than that. Some much more prolonged than that. People who die of, third-degree burns, and it takes months or years for them. And other people who just have these debilitating diseases that take years to claim their lives. So I point this out to say, all right, in 2,000 years, the cumulative suffering of people, even people who die, quote unquote, normal deaths, their lives were very difficult, and their deaths were generally painful. But tens or hundreds of thousands of others were tortured by their own governments, prisoners of war, drug cartels, whatever. However, these people died, and my position is that this is a theologian's problem. The notion of hell and the way things have been laid out in the New Testament, that in addition to all these other millions of people who have died, hundreds of thousands, excruciating deaths, it's been 2,000 years. And my thinking is that that might be long enough if there really is this account of a return, and then Judgment Day and all this. There are just major elements of that don't work. And I see that obviously as a major problem. A logical problem, a compassion problem, a kindness problem, where did you get that idea? Do you ever just you're hanging out with a friend and they come up with a really bad idea and you're like, dude, that is really freaking bad. Do not ever tell that idea to somebody. That would be the kind of thing that I would think in this circumstance where I'm going to torment millions, billions of people. Few there be that find their way therein. And you're like, I'm going to torment them forever. Well, that to me is just an idea that if a being is pure love, would never come up with that idea. Because I can't consider myself pure love, and I just wouldn't come up with that idea. And if I did, I would chastise myself for even having thought that idea. So anyway, all right, guys, leave your thoughts. We'll see where this goes. But I like discussing these topics because they can lead to some very deep conversation, whether it's isolated to the theological side or the scientific side or a combination of the two, just to sort of come to an understanding of what each side thinks. Fair enough. Let's have it. So there you go. Have a great day. See you on another video, and keep thinking theology, and hopefully it's a kind one.